I offered a rather lengthy amendment to this bill, not because I was trying to be cute, but I think the American people got to hear from us on whether we're going to make some of the common sense changes that they would expect us to make or not. And there are a lot of easy votes in this amendment. I mean, to not pay contractors when they don't deserve to be paid, well, to not continue to do that. We did it to the tune of $6 billion in the Pentagon over the last 5 years. I mean, that's not hard. To quit printing and wasting money on printing things we shouldn't be printing, that isn't hard. But the debate is important. It's just as important as taking care of those people who are unemployed. Because if we don't cycle through to a good recovery, we're going to have less opportunity to borrow money to be able to help those people who are unemployed. We now stand at a crossroads in our country that we've never been. We've never been here before. Our gross debt is in excess of $17 trillion. Our net debt's at $13.2 trillion. The difference between that is the money that the Congress has stolen from Social Security and a myriad other trust funds that are much smaller, but we've borrowed it and put a piece of paper in and said, we'll pay you back. But the fact is we have to pay interest on that. It's compounding, and we'll eventually have to pay it back. So only in Washington would we talk about net debt when in fact we're paying interest on the gross debt. And we had testimony before the Debt Commission just 2 weeks ago by Dr. Reinhardt, one of the leading economists in this country, and says that we're at excess of 90% of our GDP, our debt. And what did they tell us? We're struggling with a recession. We're trying to come out of a recession. And you know what they told us? Is with that much debt, it's suppressing the growth of our economy by 1% a year. Well, 1% a year is $170 billion in productivity and economic activity that didn't happen. And if you calculate that in terms of jobs, that's about 3 million jobs that aren't going to be created next year because the Congress is before us, and this one as well, refuses to live within our means. And we have, in terms of Washington, a relatively small bill now, $100+ billion. And it was pulled from the floor to make it smaller, not to pay for a significant amount more, just to make it smaller. When in fact what the American people want us to do is, if we need to do these things, find something somewhere within the federal government that doesn't make sense. Don't borrow it from our children. Do the hard work of finding what isn't working up there. And so we're going to have eventually a cloture vote on this. My hope is unless we change this bill, that this bill doesn't proceed until we accede to the demands of the American public. And what is it? It's really simple. Congress, start living like we're living. Start making the hard choices. When you have a limited budget, do what's most important first, do what's least important last, get rid of waste, get rid of things that should have gotten rid of a long time ago, and do what's best for the future of the country. We're not doing that with this bill. You can't get anybody to debate on the other side. They won't defend it. You cannot defend borrowing $50 billion more against our children and grandchildren when we have $300 billion of waste, fraud, abuse, and duplication in the federal government right now that we have rejected every time when those amendments come to the floor. You can't do it. And so we played the political game in Washington, and we had it in February. our colleagues passed the pay-go. And it's really to pay-go or not to pay-go. And what pay-go means is you American taxpayers, you pay and we'll go spend your money. Because the statute said we would no longer spend new money on anything unless we paid for it. Now, since February 12th, when this bill was signed into law, February 24th, we borrowed $46 billion. We waived pay-go. We said, oh, the rule doesn't apply now. This is more important. It was the Highway Trust Fund. It doesn't apply. Rather than cut some of the waste, fraud, and abuse, we didn't do it. Rather than cut out some of the things that are duplications, we didn't do it. We borrowed that from our grandchildren. We did it twice in March. $99 billion out of the Senate and $10 billion. One was for an extension, one was for the overall tax extenders bill. We didn't quit there. March came, extended for 60 days. April came, $18 billion more. May came, here's May 20th, we did $20 billion more. Pay-go didn't apply. We waived it. We said it doesn't count. The rule doesn't count to us. What good is it if you have a rule or a statute that says we're not going to steal from our children anymore, and every time something comes up, we steal from our children? It's a farce. It's meaningless. That's why we didn't vote for it. Because all it was is a charade to tell the American people somebody was doing something that they actually weren't. And the proof in the pudding is then we borrowed $59 billion on the 27th of May. And now we have a bill out here on the 17th of June that's going to borrow another $50 billion. How valuable is the life of our children that we would steal opportunity? You know, that sounds like a fallacious claim. It's not. I want you to meet Madeline. Madeline's a little girl that was outside here. I saw this on the internet. I actually got to meet her. Her sign actually said $37,000 6 months ago. In the last 6 months, she's gone from owing $37,000, every individual man, woman, and child in this country, to owing $42,000. What's her life worth? What's the opportunity for her worth? Are children just a toy? Or do we owe it to them based on what has been given to us to create opportunity and a chance for a better life for the Madelines of this world? The problem is, as we're set up right now, 9 years from now, that number is going to be $187,000 per man, woman, and child. And in 25 years from now, if we don't change what we're doing, and we will change because the world financial community will quit loaning us money, but if we don't change, it'll be over 1 million. Now, just put your calculator on for a minute and calculate 6% on 1 million. That's the interest cost for what we will have spent in money that we didn't have per person in this country. That's $60,000 25 years from now, that every one of us that's still alive will be paying each year just in additional interest before we do anything with the federal government. This government is so far out of control. It's not President Obama's fault. It is the Congress's fault. Presidents can't do things without us. We allow it or don't allow it. We have been rebellious against the principles and values that made this country great. There has never been a country that has achieved economically, culturally, scientifically, anything close to what we've created. And the Congresses are destroying it. And this bill is another little drop that will eventually turn the statute over that says the future's not here. This isn't a partisan debate. This is a generational debate because we are thieving. Generational theft is what we're about because we lack the courage to confront the real problems that we have and embrace, even though it may cost us politically, doing the right things to ensure an American dream for the Madelines of this world. We're failing to do that. What an abandonment of our oath. What a rejection of what was given to us. And yet, we have the gall to come out here week after week and spend money we don't have on some things that are necessary, some that aren't, but allow us to continue to spend billions of dollars on things that we shouldn't be spending it on because basically we lack courage. It's cowardice. It's cowardice. And so I'm committed, not just to Madeline. This doesn't have anything to do with the Republican or Democratic Party. It has to do with the survival of our country as we know it. And yet we continuously hear, no, we can't. We can't do this. We can't do this. We can't get rid of the easy things to get rid of because somebody well-heeled or somebody well-connected somewhere doesn't want us to. So who runs the country? Do the people of this country control us? Or is it the well-heeled or the well-connected? Or those that will be advantaged by us continuing to waste money when we shouldn't? The fact that we spend $6 billion over the last 5 years paying performance bonuses to companies that contract with the federal government on performance that they didn't earn, and we won't pass a law in a bill that says you can't do that anymore? Who's getting that money? Whose palms are we greasing? The fact that we won't vote that out of here and say it isn't going to happen anymore. You're either going to perform and under your contract or you're going to lose the contract, and we're not going to give you bonuses for not performing. And yet, 3 times the Senate's voted on that and voted it down. Who benefits? It certainly isn't the average American. It's some corporate client somewhere that's got too good of a sweetheart deal contracting with the federal government and has allies within the Congress that says we'll protect you on the basis of they've helped them in the campaign before. What do we want? Do we want a future or do we want well-connected, well-heeled buddies for the short term when it all collapses around us? What we are is addicted to bad behavior. We're addicted to spending money that we don't have on things we don't need. We're addicted to not confronting the very real problems in our government. And again, it's not President Obama or President Bush's fault. Congress has that responsibility. We've rejected our responsibility. We've abandoned our responsibility, and with that, our integrity, by not doing what we should do. And as a physician, I know what addictive behaviors are all about. So what do we need to do? Well, one of the things President Obama wants us to do that we refuse to do is to end no-bid contracts. Let's end the sweetheart deals. Let's get rid of the no-bid contracts that the well-connected, well-heeled get to have at a higher price than what we could pay if we competitively bid it. Let's get rid of them. Why don't we do that? That's been voted down by this body as well, twice. Well, we can't do that. We got to protect our friends. We're more interested to protect our friends than we are saving the country. Eliminate bonuses to contracts I talked about. Determine the total number and cost and purpose of every federal program You know what? The Government Accounting Office can't give us that number. It's too big. The Congressional Research Service can't tell us all the government programs, what their cost and what their purpose is. So we did get through, late last year, an amendment that's going to force the Government Accountability Office to tell us. You know how long it's going to take them to tell us? 3 years. That's how big the problem is. With all their resources, it's still going to take them 3 years to tell us all the government programs. Now, what do we know that I've found out and my staff has found out in researching this over the last 5.5 years? We've identified at least 640 different areas where there are more than 5 programs that have the same goal, run by different agencies in the federal government. We know, for example, right now some American people are struggling, and a lot of people are actually having trouble getting enough food. So we have, guess how many programs to help feed those people who are needing food? Across 6 different departments, we have 70 government programs. Not one of them has a metric on it to say, are you effective? How do you measure your effectiveness? But we have 70 sets of overhead in the federal government to do exactly the same thing. And you say, well, how in the world did that happen? I'll tell you how it happens. If some constituent comes up here and says, here's a problem. Oh yeah, you know, it is a problem. We don't research it to see what the federal government's already doing, so we author a bill. And because nobody wants to keep food away from the hungry, we pass a bill, not knowing that we already had 69 other programs. That happens time after time after time after time, still today, because we don't know what we got. In math, engineering, science, and technology, which is where we would like for lots of our young people to go, we have documented 105 different programs that are funded by the federal government to incentivize our young people to go into those areas in 8 different government agencies, 8 different government departments. Not in the Department of Education. Some of them are in there. But in every area. Why? Yet we don't want to do the hard work of eliminating those. Let's identify the 105. Let's cut it to 1. Let's put metrics on it. Let's just have 1 set of overhead. Let's accomplish that. We've added 160,000 federal employees in the last 16 months. You know, every business I know out there is doing more with less. That's not a denigration to our federal employees. It's embracing reality is that we can't continue to add federal employees. We can't afford the government we've got. 43 cents out of every dollar the federal government spends is today borrowed from China or Russia or countries with sovereign bank accounts, many of which would like to see us in. Can we continue to do that? Can we continue to have 40% of everything we're spending borrowed? What we do know is that necessity becomes the mother of invention, and if we put the clamps and the brakes on both the growth and the size and the total amount that the government spends, we will get more for the same amount. But not until we try. Not until we mandate that it has to happen. Limit the overhead costs of the federal programs. The overheads and the layers of duplication are unbelievable. Tremendous amount of savings that can be done there. I just visited with a 3-star general that's working inside the Pentagon. One of the areas where I want to see us eliminate $50 billion a year in spending is inside the Pentagon, because they've got that much waste. They're going through a process now to look at where they have redundancy. And you know what? They're finding it everywhere. But the Pentagon's so big, unless you look for it, you're never going to see it. So we now have the military starting to do what they finally need to do. They've never done it before, starting to look at redundancy, started looking at good management, best practices to create efficiencies so that more dollars can defend us and less dollars spent in overhead. We need to do that government-wide. But especially in the Pentagon, since it's our greatest discretionary cost with the exception of interest. Disclose the cost, purpose, and text of legislation that's considered by Congress. There should not be a bill that comes before Congress that we don't adequately and accurately know what it's designed to do, have a measurement on it so we know if it did what we designed it to do, know what it's going to cost, and then force ourselves to evaluate it. You know, this is the 111th Congress. In the 109th Congress, I held 47 oversight hearings. There was more oversight hearings than the entire rest of the Senate combined. Because you see, we don't want to do the oversight because it's hard work and you don't get great press clippings. You know, it doesn't help your campaign, your political career. But we weren't set up here for a political career. We were sent here to do the best right thing for the country as a whole. Most of the problems that we're seeing are parochial in nature, where we have concentrated on what's best for our state at the expense of what's best for our country. And I would posit that my state, Oklahoma, and the President Pro Tem state can't be healthy if the country isn't healthy. They can't be. And yet when our focus becomes more parochial than it does national, we actually undermine our future as a country. Number 8, require the Congress to justify the creation of new government programs that duplicate existing ones. You know what I find all the time, and I'm notorious for not letting bills get to the floor, is because they duplicate something that's already being done. And we created a new program, but we didn't eliminate the old one. So now we have both of them running. And I usually get beat. I usually get rolled with 60 votes, and we create the new program. But we never eliminated the one that wasn't working, and we never changed the one that wasn't working. So we just create another program. Mandate the Congress has to do oversight. Has to do it. It must do oversight. And we can do that by changing our rules. But we don't have any interest in changing our rules. It's easier to coast and not do the hard job of oversight. I'll just finish up. One of the things that I've thought about, I'm not sure it'll be helpful, but right now, in the trouble that we're in, everybody who walks through this Capitol ought to be informed of how much debt we owe and what it is per person. And we ought to be having that. It's in my office, in the hall. You walk by. The Rules Committee won't let me put it in the hall. They say it doesn't look professional. But I have a computer screen that if you walk by my office, you can see the national clock dead ticking. I mean, it'll blow your eye. Your eyes will roll as fast as it's coming up. Remember, we're borrowing about $4 million a second. I mean, that's how fast it's going up. So anyhow, there are a lot of things we can do to stop the addiction. I see the senators in Georgia. Did you want to have some time? I'll be happy to yield to you if you'll yield back to me, Madam President.
Madam President.
Senator from Georgia.
I thank the senator from Oklahoma for yielding, and I will be brief.